evening. Welcome to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. If you ask anyone around you today, how are you doing? The answer you'll get is pretty predictable. I'm so busy. And you'll probably answer just as predictably. I know, me too. Today's world is one of too much work to do, too much communication, too much information, and too many expectations. We strive to keep up, but we are falling behind. We're overwhelmed by our inboxes, squeezed by our calendars, and intimidated by ever-growing to-do lists. But despite what you've been told and may even believe, busyness is not an inevitable consequence of modern life. It's actually a really bad strategy for success and tends to lead to more bad habits. On tonight's show, our panel of guests will help debunk the myths around busyness and share practical strategies that will give you back control over your life while making more impact and experiencing more joy. First, it's an honor to welcome Sheri Riley to the show. Sheri Riley is a wife, mother, daughter, and entrepreneur, and we all know that juggling all these roles at once is not easy, but she's figured out how to make it simple. She's an empowerment speaker and a high-performance life coach. Her book, Exponential Living, Stop Spending 100% of Your Time on 10% of Who You Are, has won numerous Self-Help Book of the Year awards and has been translated into Romanian and Vietnamese. Sheri speaks around the world, sharing her message of peace is the new success. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sheri.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have this important conversation.
Next, I am so pleased to welcome Aleem Nasser. Aleem is the founder of a one-of-a-kind formula called Equation for Success. Using his formula, Aleem has helped over 3,500 university students, professionals, and industry leaders significantly improve their productivity, efficiency, motivation, and perhaps most importantly, mental health. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
I'd like to start by digging into both your personal stories and the aha moments that you experienced that brought you to do this for a living, basically helping others regain control over their lives at different stages. Sheri, let's start with you. You had a very successful career in the music business. You worked with big-time artists like Usher, who actually wrote the foreword for your book. At some point, you said, this isn't worth it, and you walked away from it all, and you took another path. Take us through your journey.
Well, I am from a small town in the U.S., and I always had this dream of working in the entertainment industry. But being from a small town, nowhere near New York and Los Angeles, which were the hubs of entertainment, it was honestly this impossible dream. I mean, everybody felt like I was talking about building hotels on Mars. I mean, that's how realistic I sounded. And after a whole lot of years, a whole lot of no's, a whole lot of pressing, here I am. I have my dream job. I'm working in the entertainment industry. I'm making six figures in my mid-20s. I bought my mother a home by the age of 27. I love the artists I was working with. I love the people I was working with. I love my job. And I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. Because what I realized, Barbara, is I had this great career, but I didn't have a good life. And I crashed and burned. I was so overwhelmed. I was so overworked. I was so busy, but not productive, that I literally crashed and burned. And so for me, when people say, oh my God, how did you get this amazing revelation? And I go, laying on the bathroom floor in the dark, crying my heart out. Because I was just miserable. And the worst thing in the world is to have the thing you absolutely love to do, but have a life that is absolutely draining the core of who you are.
And how did you know that you were not in the life you were meant to be in? What was your gut telling you?
Yeah, so all along there was this inkling inside of me, that small, still voice that was, honestly, hindsight, I realized that I had fulfilled the one dream, and it's okay to have more than one dream, because now I've fulfilled the idea, the purpose, the soul earning that I had to work in the music industry, but I also wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I say all the time, the crash and burn was really a blessing because it allowed me to recognize that that season was over and it was okay to now pursue another dream. And a lot of times we're miserable or our insides are searching for peace because we are staying somewhere longer than what we truly desire or need to be. And so after I resigned from LaFace Records, I opened up a consulting firm that I had for 17 years, where my clients were everyone from Converse to the NBA to WarnerMedia. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur as well. So that inkling of you finished this, it's time to move on, I didn't listen to it. I actually had to crash and burn before I heard it. But the second time, when I had my business for 17 years, I felt that inkling again that it was time to transition into what I do now, serving as a high performance life coach and life strategist. And so, an empowerment speaker. And this time I was able to listen to that inner voice and really put together a plan and a strategy to guide me through that transition. So I tell people all the time, Barbara, I always say we always know. Now, we may not be ready to make a decision. We may not be ready to move, but that inner voice is always telling us what our truth is.
And you had already been through this before, so I guess you could recognize the signs, but still it takes so much courage to actually listen to that voice and not shoo it away into the back of our minds. And I want to talk a little bit more about what it takes to harness that courage that we all have inside ourselves. But first, I want to go back to Aleem. And Aleem, you gave a very touching TED Talk about all the hard work you poured into your studies as a high school and university student. And you've worked hard from a very young age in school, but your grades never reflected your perseverance and your effort. You know, the adage of work hard and you'll succeed was actually a fallacy, and you had to find it out the hard way. Take us a little bit through your journey and through your own aha moment that led you to be doing what you do for a living.
No, absolutely. First off, though, I got to tell you that I love Usher's music. So, Sheri, I'm very impressed that you got a chance to work with him. He's just brilliant. He's got some good music out there. So, I just got to start off with that. So, I think I appreciate it, Barbara, that you watched that TED Talk. But I think the thing that I appreciate more is you got the real meaning out of it. And one of the things that caused me to sort of do the talk was that I just realized that people in general have been given a kind of like a formula to be successful, but that formula is incomplete. So, for example, since I was a kid, I always wanted to be a high achiever and just do great things with my life. And the only thing I knew to do was just work hard. And as a result of that, and not unsimilar to Sheri's, that I actually burnt out because I was working really hard, but the results were not coming. And then I realized that, that work hard and you'll succeed formula really was incomplete. And I realized there were some other elements which no one ever taught me. And what was really interesting is I would look out in the real world and I would see the people who were actually getting better results. And they actually were not working harder than me. They were doing actually a lot of different things, which were very, it didn't make sense to me until I actually did a little bit more research behind it.
What's interesting, Aleem, is you mentioned this in your talk, is that those around you who were calm and relaxed and went out on weekends and allowed themselves to experience joy were consistently outperforming people like you who were pulling all-nighters in the library. And gosh, that really doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, tell me about it, especially when you have a genius sister who studies while the TV's on, and then the next day she gets, 85 or 90% on her exam. It's not fair at all. But unfortunately, I didn't have that smart gene that she had. But what I realized was that I needed to actually figure out what was missing, and I thought about it, and I realized that this whole concept of happiness and joy is not taught to us in the right way. And I find that in our Western culture, we look at happiness and joy as an end result. But I actually think that it should not be an end result. I actually think it's an ingredient to help us be successful. Just like you would have a tool such as a computer to be successful, or, a writing instrument to be successful, I think you also need to cultivate joy and happiness in the same way to be successful, and not look at it as if it's an end goal.
And Sheri, you talk a lot about the importance of joy and happiness and finding that peace in your life. You talk a lot about that in your book. Was it difficult for you to get to a point where you could allow yourself to experience these feelings without feeling guilty, without feeling like you were wasting time or doing something that you shouldn't? Because I know for me as an overachiever, it's hard to get past the guilt if I'm not feeling productive.
Oh my gosh, I'm over here like wanting to jump up and down because everything you're saying, Elam, I'm like, yes, that part right there. Yeah, you know what? That's why, Barbara, I say the core to exponential living is pursuing peace, choosing clarity, and living courageously. Because we have to start with that peace. Peace is that inner decision, that inner calm that allows us to tap into our power. And when we get to that place of peace, it gives us clarity. And when you have peace and clarity together, oh my God, you have the courage to make decisions. You have the courage to tell yourself that I will no longer feel guilty. It's okay to be present in this moment and not stressing about tomorrow or feeling bad about yesterday. All I have is this moment of being present. And when you commit to peace, clarity, and courage, when you get present in every moment, then you tap into what Elam is saying with that joy and that happiness. Principle 6, there's 9 principles of exponential living. And the 6th principle is happy is a choice, joy is a lifestyle. And I so echo what you said, because those two keys, happiness and joy, aren't destinations that we reach. They really are the fuel that allows us to enjoy every moment. So Barbara, to your point, how do you not feel guilty? Well, when you get the clarity and the courage, when you allow yourself to experience the joy and happiness of every moment, then it allows you to honestly be able to say to those thoughts, no, I'm not missing out on anything because I'm present in this moment. And I'll share this real quick story.
We're just about to go to break. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to hear more about those 9 principles when we come back right after the break. Welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and on tonight's show, we're talking about how to work smarter, not harder, and to escape the cult of busyness with very special guests, Sheri Riley and Aleem Nasser. Back in the 1950s, when Winston Churchill was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, he had a vision of the future. Productivity was increasing rapidly due to technological advances, and so he had this idea of giving the working man and woman what they never had before, basically a break. 4 days work, 3 days of leisure. So where have we gone wrong? I mean, most people I know don't even get a 2-day weekend. They're always on their phones, on their Blackberries, in their email. And all the filters are gone in terms of working hours or having to go somewhere in person to find out information, or only having access to one person because there's a gatekeeper like a personal secretary. We communicate all the time to anyone we want and as many people as we want at any time of day. And with so many of us working from home because of coronavirus, some of us may feel like we're never even leaving the office. Being busy has become the latest status symbol, and it's kind of an addiction as well. People think I'm important because I'm busy, and I must be important because I'm busy, and I'm busy because I'm important. I wanted to ask you both, Sheri and Aleem, what are some of the myths and the patterns that you see repeating themselves over and over again in the clients that you coach? Is there a lot of resistance at first in terms of letting go of the myth that busyness is important and something that is part of having a productive life? Let's start with you, Aleem.
Okay, I was going to let Sheri go first. I think you're right, Barbara. I think one of the things that, and I see it all the time it's almost as if when we say we're hard workers, we carry it like it's a badge of honor. And yeah, I'm a hard worker, so that means I'm at a higher level than somebody else. And I think that's something, I teach a lot at university. And one of the things I teach my students is that, in fact, I'll just take a step back. There was a nice story about Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee talked about, if you want to become a better martial artist, what you want to do is you want to unlearn the things that you've been taught before. So there was an apprentice who wanted to learn how to become a better martial artist. And Bruce Lee, gave him a cup and he said, how are you going to put more water in this cup? And the apprentice didn't know. And so Bruce Lee said, you actually have to pour it out, right? And then the cup is empty again. So in the same way, that's kind of what we need to do to get more effective in terms of our productivity. We got to actually let go of some of the old programming in terms of what it means to be successful. And the old programming suggests that hard work is going to make us successful. The reality is hard work plus other factors need to be in play. And one of those factors we touched on before the break, and what Sheri also agreed with, was that you still have to have that joy, that passion, because those are the things that actually help you deal with all the challenges, the friction, the setbacks. Those things are the things that cause people to give up and fail. And with the right emotions, that's one of the things that'll help you get through those challenges.
Aleem, you had mentioned earlier the idea of the Western definition of success, and it's an interesting segue to research I read recently. It was a study on busyness, and the researchers surveyed a group of Americans and a group of Italians on how they thought of people who were extremely busy and versus people who had a lot of leisure time. And the Italians thought that people who had a lot of leisure time must be very wealthy, whereas the Americans thought, oh, well, if they're not working, there must be something wrong. They must be suffering. Let's hope they get back to work soon. And so that leads me to go back to you, Sheri. I'm wondering, how has your definition of success changed for you personally? And how do you work with your clients on crafting a definition of success that's realistic and authentic for them?
Well, as you know, I speak around the world and I say peace is the new success. And the reason that I grew to that definition of success for myself, and a lot of my clients have adopted that reality as well, is because so many of us, as you just highlighted, we're pursuing careers and titles or a certain level of wealth, and we receive those things, and then we realize we're still not happy. We realize we're still empty. We realize that we don't have the thing that we were actually wanting the money or the relationships to give us, which is peace. And so what I do with my clients is we work on pursuing the peace first so that we then are empowered to enjoy all the external success that we achieve. And what I find with many of my clients is that their definition of success is clouded by this idea that they can create balance in their life. And so the first thing we have to do is debunk the myth of balance, right? I say in the first 60 pages of my book, I don't believe in balance. What I do believe in is full life integration. How do we integrate the things in our lives that we really want to include? So we talk about, I value my family, but if I look at your calendar, I don't see any time with your family. Or we say we value ourselves, our self-care. But if I look at your calendar, I don't see anywhere where you're working out, you're exercising, or you're spending quality time with yourself, recharging. And so what I really challenge my clients is, if you want to have a pure definition of success that's beyond your career, then you have to really be integral. But when you identify the things you value, then you have to make sure that you're spending time on those things that you say that you value.
Busyness can kind of be a convenient excuse, right? Like if you don't have the best relationship with your kids, or there's something that you're avoiding, you can just keep saying, oh, I'm so busy. I don't have time for that. I'm too busy putting out these fires and answering these emails. But it's kind of a cop-out, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell so many of my clients, if you want to know why that 16-year-old child you have won't talk to you, Well, it's because when they were 4, 5, and 6, every time they had a question, you were like, wait a minute, I'll get to it in a minute. No, I got to check this email. Well, hold on, let me finish this call. And so you trained that 16-year-old not to talk to you. And so now when you need them to talk to you, when you want them to talk to you, when you want to have that relationship before they leave for college, but they never learned that from you. And you're exactly right, Barbara. It can be a cop-out or a habit where you desire to have that quality time, but it's what you referenced earlier, but you've created this habit and then you feel guilty for not taking that time to be present. And it really is a practice. Like, I don't just think my clients are going to just automatically get it, because if they would, they wouldn't need me. And so I actually have programs that I really work with them on their time allocation, work with them first on how to really shift their mindset and their parents. One of the first things I say when I step on a stage is my number one goal is to 100% change your mindset and shift your paradigm. Because if I don't help you recreate a new pattern in thinking, then I'll never get to the point of affecting your actions. And if I don't change your actions, I'll never help you create new habits. And so much of what we do with our time is just habitual. We don't even think about it. Like you referenced in the opening, that massive to-do list. Like we just literally throw everything on our to-do list and don't even think about, is this even important? Does this even directly affect what I want to achieve? Or am I just saying, oh, here it is, let me do it. Here it is, let me do it. Yeah.
I'm smiling because you talk a lot about mindset, and I know that your co-panelist, Aleem, is all about mindset. So that being said, let's talk about your patented equation for success. Let's pull out the image that you sent us earlier, Aleem, about the equation of success. Let's talk a little bit about those key ingredients. And I know for you, mindset is the largest, the most important ingredient.
Yeah, absolutely. But first off, I just want to give Sheri a virtual high five. There you go. Because I totally agree with what she's saying. I think one of the things that we need to look at here is, mindset is important, but I think before we even consider our mindset, we actually have to get crystal clear on what success means to us. And I think what ends up happening is a lot of people, they're not clear on their definition of success. So what happens is they're working really, really hard to achieve somebody else's definition of success. And then finally, when they achieve what they think is successful, they're not happy because it's not their definition. So what we need to do is we need to first get that handled. And then what we need to do is we need to understand that, look, mindset is a big component. In my opinion, it's the biggest component. But what happens is people don't understand this whole concept of mindset. Like, what is it? And the reality is that our mindset is, in my opinion, the greatest gift we've ever been given, but we've never been given a manual in terms of how to use it. So it's like you're given a Ferrari and all you know is how to drive in first gear. Like it's a shame. So one of the things that we want to do here is when we start understanding the power of our mind, we can actually start creating really unique and innovative ways to get so much done in less time. And one of the things I think maybe some of the viewers might want to know is, how do you actually cultivate a better mindset? And I think one of the best ways to do that is to ask yourself really, really good questions. And one of the questions I get my students to answer is, I get them to sit back and just reflect and say, look, if I was a genius, how would I handle this problem? And straight away they kind of resist a little bit, but then eventually these really amazing ideas start to happen in their own mind. And then they come up with these very efficient ways of solving problems. And it's because, number one, they relaxed. Number two, they asked themselves the correct question. And then they just kind of let it happen, which is really how the mind works. But if we're stressed and we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves and we're trying to kind of like force everything, we're not allowing the mind to function well. And the mind is more like a muscle, right? So if you're always stimulating the muscle, it's never going to grow until it actually rests. And so this is why you need to allow the mind to rest, rejuvenate, feel good, feel happy, and then you'll get a lot more out of your mind than you ever thought possible.
But some people flourish under stress, or at least that's what they say. Are they just fooling themselves?
I think people just work, period, under stress. Because the comment I hear is that I work better under pressure. right? I think that's what you're referring to, Barbara. I work better under
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah.
And my response is no, they don't work better. They just work.
Interesting. Because myself coming from a very high pressure journalistic reporter environment, I find that I'm most productive when I've got multiple deadlines and sort of people hovering around and saying, where's my article? And I tend to procrastinate when that pressure is not there.
Yeah. So what happens is that the procrastination, the fear of not getting it done actually kicks you into high gear to get it done.
I want to hear more about that, but we're just about to get into break. When we come back, more on Sheri Riley's 9 Principles of Exponential Living. Don't go away. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. On tonight's show, we've got a powerhouse panel of guests, Aleem Nasser and Sheri Riley, who are teaching you tonight on how to manage your time, manage your life, redefine your idea of success, and escape the cult of busyness that is plaguing us all. Aleem, before we went to break, we started talking a little bit about people who say that they function better under pressure. And I'm certainly guilty of saying that a lot, of being one of those people, having come from a very high energy, multiple deadline, multitasking environment of the newsroom. And I certainly find that when I've got a deadline around the corner, I'm much more motivated than when the deadline is far away. I'm definitely a lifelong procrastinator, but am I just fooling myself? I mean, certainly I'm getting stressed out when that deadline is looming, and I might say to myself, why did I leave it to the last minute? But I think part of the reason why I do this is that every time I manage to hit the deadline, I have not failed yet, but am I just setting myself up for failure?
So I don't think, by the way, Barbara, this is an excellent question, because this is what a lot of people struggle with, or a lot of people, they question. So I don't think it's that you're setting yourself up for failure, but the way I would look at it is, you are hitting your deadlines, which is great. But what happens is, well, first off, procrastination is actually not a logical problem. It's an emotional problem. And so the reason why people kick into high gear when the deadline is approaching is because it's the emotion that drives them into taking the action. It's not actually anything else. They just have a fear that if they don't get it done, something bad is going to happen. So it's a fear-based problem. Now, the problem with procrastination is that when you do things at the last minute, you may get it done and you may hit the mark, but you'll never surpass the mark, and you'll never do amazing, amazing work, and you'll never know your true potential, because you'll never have time to actually fine-tune your work. You'll never have time to reflect on it. You'll never get time to get some feedback on it, get clarification on it, maybe even look at it in a different perspective and take a different angle on it. And so what ends up happening is, yes, it does get done, but it may not get done to the ability that you potentially could have done it till. And I think if you actually give yourself more time to reflect and to analyze your work, you could probably look back on some of the things that you've done and we've done, and we could always look back and say, you know what, I could have done that better.
I think that's an excellent point, because when you're always being reactive, you can never be proactive, and you can never really dig deep and get into that analysis and critical thinking. You're just busy putting out fires. Sheri, you look like you have something to add to that.
Yeah, I did, and because I love the answer, and I just wanted to add, and the challenge with that is we also narrowed our behavior to just a work environment. And we miss the fact that that type of behavior is not productive and it's not helpful outside of work. And so now we bring that same, procrastination, now overdrive into our relationships with our loved ones, into our relationships with our families, our relationships with our friends. And so a gear that does have some level of use in a work environment, like you said, as a journalist, multi-deadlines, multiple tasks. But once you come out of that environment, the challenge is we don't know how to turn it off. And so now we're working at that same high gear all the time. And our relationships with our friends are damaged. We want to be married or have these productive relationships with our significant other. But at the end of the day, they do not want to spend all day, every day with someone that's on gear 150. You want to have that environment that's more conducive to a relationship, or you have your children that your drive is now put on them, and you never give them the space for you just to have that parent-child relationship. So in addition to what was already shared, just saying that overdrive that constantly can be to some extent beneficial at work, it really does cause for damaging or challenging relationships in your personal life. And that's where the real conflict comes.
And I've read that neurologically multitasking is actually really bad for you. And of course, all the physical impacts.
Yeah, your brain. There's a neuroscientist at Stanford University. He's one. But it's been proven the brain can only focus on one thing at a time. Now, the brain is so absolutely brilliant that it can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth faster than you can blink your eyelashes. But all it's doing is going back and forth, back and forth. And so to Aleem's point, you're not actually multitasking. All you're doing is going back and forth. You're not really focused, and you aren't producing your best work. You're just making the deadline.
And Aleem, you had something to add to that?
Well, I just think I found my new BFF in Sheri, because she's bang on with everything she's saying. One of the things you need to understand is that, multitasking is kind of watering it down on both ends. I mean, unless you're chewing gum and walking, multitasking is actually not recommended. But again, it's something that we've been taught is effective, but it's, again, something we need to unlearn. And I think these kind of habits or these insights we've been given is a lot of the reason why we have problems. Like, multitasking is actually not a good thing, but a lot of people think it is. Hard work is actually not the best way to do it, but most people think it is. So we have to actually start to unlearn and get new and better information in terms of how we can be successful.
I see so many job descriptions specifically call for some of these traits. For instance, multitasking. Like, I see that over and over and over again. And I wonder if either of you have ever consulted or worked with HR managers and sort of helped them reward their job postings, or in terms of what they're looking for. Not having overworked, burnt out employees, and understanding what productivity really means. Sheri, I see you smiling. It sounds like it resonates with you.
It does. And that was why I've been very intentional about what I call work with high performers or high achievers, working with those leaders, those, CEOs, C-suite executives, executive vice presidents, because I do believe what you're saying, Barbara, that it does have to be a paradigm shift from the top down. Because if you are the leader and you are burnt out, or you're focused on only 10% of who you are, and you're creating environment and that culture in your company, then you're not really understanding all the dynamics that make for a more productive team. And if your team is burned out, they're never going to be able to truly deliver for the people that are most important, which are your customers. And so what I do work with the high-level decision makers on the power of peace, clarity, and courage, and how it increases productivity. And one of the most dynamic changes that I've noticed in the last 5 to 10 years is that companies and individuals and corporate leaders are starting to recognize that health and wellness is more than just diet and exercise. What we do between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. directly affects how productive we are between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. So even though we have this idea of, leave home at home and work at work, we don't do that. If there's pressure at work, we take it home. And if there's unrest at home, we bring it to work. And so helping companies really implement strategies that empower personal development, they're learning that does fuel the professional development of their employees, which is increasing their productivity. Because if you have employees that are burning out and leaving your company like I did, it is going to continually affect the return on investment because of the turnover, because of the days off, because of their health, their wellness, because of the morale. And those things directly affect the productivity of the business. So there has been some shift in that dynamic. And I I work with companies helping to amplify that message.
That's wonderful. This is, yep. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that, and I think some people might be thinking, what's the fastest way we can get productive? And I would basically say the fastest way you can get productive is to build in your schedule a time for rejuvenation. Rejuvenation can do wondrous things, but most people, again, they're not aware of this whole concept of rejuvenation. But I think it can do wondrous things.
Right, because
I'm applauding you.
Yeah. And further to your point, Aleem, I mean, rest is not just sitting around checking your social media. It's not flipping mindlessly through your phone. I mean, rest is like quality rest. It means maybe distancing yourself from a toxic relationship, spending time around people that nurture you and make you grow. I mean, what are some of the ways in which you tell your clients, Aleem, to rejuvenate themselves? I mean, it's more than just a pedicure or a cup of hot chocolate, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things that you want to understand here is that there's a lot of internal friction that we have on a regular basis. Like this could and again, it goes back to mindset. Like if you have a lot of stress and anxiety and worries in your mind, that's actually a form of, how do I say it? That's actually robbing you of a lot of energy and productivity that you could have because you still got these things going on in your head. So first step is clean up your mindset by getting rid of these negative types of thoughts, because this internal friction you may not even realize, but it's robbing you of your ability to focus and to handle challenges. That's the first thing I would do.
Easier said than done, though, right?
Absolutely. And it's because, that's a good point. But I also think that the reason why it seems like it's easier said than done is because most people don't understand how the mind actually works. And if you understand that it's like a muscle, and if you understand that the mind actually needs time to rest and rejuvenate, and there are ways to, and I can share some with you in terms of how you can actually develop that, take the pressure off your mindset. But once you make that a priority, you'll start to notice your innovation, your creativity, your performance levels, they skyrocket because you're now treating your mind the way it should be treated, which is in a very nurturing and rejuvenation type of approach. And one of the things, I mean, if people want to know how they can rejuvenate their mind, is just get a textbook or just get a normal book, a notebook, and write down all these negative thoughts that are going on in your head, and just look at them. And just in that exercise alone, you'll start to feel your pressure go down and the stress go down just by writing it out. Because now it's taking it out from your brain, it's putting it somewhere else, and you come back to it later, and you can focus on other things.
We just have a minute before we go to break, but can you get into time management really quickly? And I understand the irony of what I'm asking you.
Yeah, quite funny. But the reality is most people think that time management is actually dividing up your day and schedule things within the 24 hours that you have. And again, I don't think that's the best definition of time management. The definition, in my opinion, is you want to figure out what habits are going to lead to your definition of success. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is when you've established those habits, and mind you, I'm using the word habits deliberately, right? So what that means is actually doing the things on a daily basis, plus having high levels of energy to get those things done. If you can combine the two, you'll be blown away as to how effective you can be by using your time effectively in this manner.
And we're going back to break. So more from our experts after the commercial break. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and on tonight's show, we're talking about how to escape the cult of busyness with our powerhouse panel of guests, Sheri Riley and Aleem Nasser. Again, thank you so much to you both for joining us tonight. We only have about 12 minutes left in our time together, and we still have lots of material to cover. I wanted to start with you, Sheri, and speak about some of the exponential principles you reference in your book, and your catchphrase, and I love it. It's stop spending 100% of your time on 10% of who you are. And that's so true, because we've all heard that saying about how we use or we wear 20% of our clothing 80% of our time, and the same idea goes for our possessions. But I had never heard of this sort of phrased in this way before. Talk to us a little bit about some of those principles, and which ones do you hold the most dear to you?
Yes, so there's 9 principles of exponential living. And me being a marketing girl at heart, the very first time I ever said stop spending 100% of your time on 10% of who you are, I immediately knew, oh my God, that's a phenomenal tagline, right? But the reality is how do you do that? How do you stop spending 100% of your time on 10% of who you are and expecting 100% of your fulfillment? And what I discovered is these 9 principles. The first principle is live in your power. And that's about making decisions. The first thing we have to do is we have to decide. We have to decide what's most important. We have to decide what the perspective. We have to be engaged. And that's where we get the reward. So the first principle is live in your power. Another principle I'll highlight, since we kind of referenced it earlier, is pursue peace and a positive mind. And what that is about is our attitude, the mindset. How are you going to get up every day? I love what Aline just said about just how you really set the tone on what you're going to be focused on with that mindset, your beliefs, that positive energy, that positive thinking. The 5th principle is stop working and start maximizing, which confuses most people, especially busy people. Like, what do you mean stop working and start maximizing? Well, that honestly is the anchor to exponential living because it is the fuel. And what that means, stop working, start maximizing. Stop just being busy for the sake of busy and really get aligned with how am I going to be productive? When you stop working and when you start maximizing, what it's saying is that you will no longer just frivolously and just put your time in everything, but you will be very intentional about what's most important. And when you're intentional about what's most important, that's when you increase your productivity. But in order to do that, we have to define what is our why. What's really our definition of success? And then I'll just tap on the last one because it's so important, or the next to the last one. The 8th principle is the courage to be faithful. The courage to be faithful. And this is about healing, because a lot of the times what keeps us from experiencing exponential living, what keeps us from experiencing it really is fulfilling, is that we have to heal. And the healing isn't always from trauma. A lot of times when we think about healing, we think about childhood trauma or something negative that's happened. But many times we have to heal from mindsets and strongholds and paradigms that have been established. And what I mean is, was, married 20 some years, still loved and liked her husband, 2 children that were very successful. She had a multi-million-dollar business. And when we started working together, she said, I'm trapped in my own success. I don't know who I am beyond the titles that I have. And what we discovered is that when she was 9 years old, her uncle said to her, if you like to eat, you have to work hard. And so she spent her entire life chasing this reality that if she didn't work hard, she wouldn't get to eat. Even though she was a multimillionaire, even though she had this successful career, even though it's that full team, like if she didn't come to work, her staff had everything and she was, the company would not be affected. But she had to heal and understand success was not defined by this one idea of she's got to work. Because for her at that point in her life, success was a travel, being able to serve in a mission environment. So she ended up, after we worked together, serving mission trips in Kenya. She ended up losing weight. She ended up doing all of these amazing things that fulfilled her life instead of just working 28 hours a day. And so that's to be faithful. So that's a few of the principles, but they can definitely get all 9 principles in my book, Exponential Living.
And further to your point about healing, I think busyness is one of the last socially acceptable forms of addiction. And as such, I think, as I alluded to earlier, people turn to being busy as a coping mechanism or because they're afraid to pursue those dreams that you mentioned. Has that been your experience, Sheri?
Absolutely. It is absolutely a form of self-sabotage. Being busy is a form of self-sabotage. self-sabotage because it keeps you distracted. And most people think, oh my God, if you're busy or if you're working 24 hours a day, or what do you say? Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm busy. Then people celebrate you. But it's self-destructive. And honestly, it keeps us trapped in areas that we really are missing out on the joy and the happiness that we've talked about throughout this entire conversation. Just numb ourselves with busyness, numb ourselves, like you said, with the next goal, the next achievement. And then we get to a point where we either burn out or we don't have the full life that we all truly desire.
Now, Aleem, I'm interested in hearing your take on this. When do you know whether what you're facing is an opportunity or a distraction that's disguised as an opportunity?
So, that's such a great comment. But I think one of the things that we haven't actually addressed, which I think is critical for those people watching, is that we need to understand that a lot of the reasons why we're not succeeding is because we're allowing distraction in. Like just on this, discussion that we're having, I've already got 2 text messages. And can you imagine if I was responding to the text messages and trying to do this at the same time? Both are going to suffer. Now imagine if doing that at work, right? So I think we need to understand that distraction is one of the biggest issues we're having in this time of our lives, and we need to learn how to manage that very effectively.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, one key factor that I don't think has been addressed yet, but I think it's very important. And then the other question you had was, how do you determine if it's an opportunity or it's a distraction? Is that correct, Barbara?
Yeah. I mean, how do you know when to say no or when to say yes?
So this, in my opinion, all boils down. It becomes very, very simple and very easy when you've done your first step of that equation for success, and that is to clearly define what success means to you. If you don't know, you're going to let a lot of these things just get in your way because they sound cool and they're fun, and maybe you'll make a little bit of money on the side. But if you know what your definition of success is, it becomes very easy to say no.
And so what's your definition of success? How has it evolved since you were a high school and university student?
Yeah, well, people ask me that. I have a multi-layered definition of success. I don't believe that success should be just one thing. So I have a spiritual definition of success, which means that I make sure that I keep my connection to God or the universe, whatever people believe in. I always make sure I keep that strong. So I believe in my faith quite a bit. I believe that we have material definitions of success. So as long as I have enough financial means to survive, provide for myself, I'm not married, I don't have kids. So for me, it's just myself right now. But if I do get married one day, and if I do have kids, then I have to make that as part of my definition of success. But also just in terms of my character, like I want to make sure that I'm honest, I'm trustworthy. I say what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do what I say. And then also there's a definition of success in terms of how I relate to myself. Do I have a good relationship with myself? And a lot of times people overlook that. But if you have a good relationship with yourself, you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you like who you are, to me, that's priceless. And I don't know if people actually know how to actually do that, but I had to figure out how to do it. And a lot of it had to do with the mindset that I had.
Yeah, it takes a lot of hard work. Back to you, Sheri. I want to hear about your definition of success, and also let's dive into where people can find you, get a copy of your book, and be part of your community.
I echo everything Aleem just said. Like that part right there. Like I think we were separated at birth. Because, so much of what we said is so aligned. But that really is the definition of success. It is that 100%. And what I call exponential living, which I would love for your audience to join my exponential community at Sheri.com. I would love to connect on Instagram with that same title. And then also for anyone that would like to purchase a copy of Exponential Living, my book, it's available everywhere books are sold, ebooks and audiobooks, but you can also get autographed copies at peaceisthenewsuccess.com.
Peace is the new success.com. Okay, great. Wonderful. And we have a couple minutes left before the end of our show. Aileen, any parting thoughts for our guests, for our viewers?
You know what? If you have any students in the audience, I've actually written a book called Simple Strategies to Study Smarter. And you can easily find that on Amazon. Also, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And you can also find me at AileenNasser.com as well. And I do private coaching, and I call these academic excellence boot camps, where I can get students in and I can just teach them quickly how to increase their productivity and the results in school. But I also work with professionals as well. And I coach them on how they can actually get more done with less time and get better results.
So if there's 3 really easy things that our viewers can start doing right now, what would you suggest, Sheri?
Oh my goodness. So if there was 3 things I would suggest doing right now, one of them is kind of an echo of what was said earlier. And that is, I would say, sit down and on the left side of the paper, write all the things that you have to be grateful for. And on the right side of the paper, write all frustrating or hurtful or negative. And you'll see that positive list, you're going to have to stop yourself, and the negative list will end. And there's going to be the negative list is going to be very small. A positive list is always going to be longer. And commit to what I call a 21-day peace and a positive mind fast or challenge, where for 21 days, you focus on positive thinking. And every time a negative thought comes up, you stop that thought and replace it with a positive thought. So you wake up in the morning and go, oh my God.
So I'm sorry I have to cut you off, but I want to thank you both so much for your time tonight. Our viewers are so lucky to benefit from your wisdom and insight. Aileen Nasser and Sheri Riley, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night. And to those of you who are watching us, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again in the studio next week.